Here on the channel, we talk about the pre-Hispanic past, but what about the present? Today we're analyzing just how pre-Hispanic the outfits of modern-day dancers really are. And let's be clear, when we say dancers, we're not talking about the fanatics who get drunk, buy their so-called feather headdresses and the Sonora Market in Mexico City, and then head to stadiums to cheer on the national disappointment. Her, I mean team, just to prove how Mexican they are. Nope. This video is about those who make this activity a more or less consistent tradition. Among dancers, participation fluctuates. Some people have been doing this for years, even decades, with varying levels of knowledge about historical sources. Others just come and go. One day they're dancing, the next day they're gone. You'll find everything from dancers who charge for performance, whether at the Zócalo or other places, to professionals in the field of folklore, and those who do it just for fun, passion, or love of the art. These dancers sometimes appear in series, movies, documentaries, and some have even performed for popes and other famous figures. What stands out most are their flashy outfits, some weapons, and of course feathers. Lots of feathers. But not all dancers dress the same. There's something for every taste. Though many people might think you see these eye-catching costumes all over Mexico, the truth is they're mostly concentrated in Mexico City, parts of the state of Mexico, and few sporadic locations in other states, and some areas in the US. And that's it, right? This isn't even a nationwide phenomenon. So let's focus. How truly pre-Hispanic are these costumes? First, let's talk about their original functions and who used them. These were outfits for war. They were signs of prestige earned in battle, symbols of status for rulers and warriors. In other words, over 500 years ago, very few people had the right to wear them. By Asian standards, no one today would be allowed to use them. Back then, there were strict rules. Some outfits were even required as tribute to other peoples, as documented in the Matrícula de Tributos, but issued by the Mexica government, not the general population. These costumes were collected periodically and then distributed among warriors. Sure, some were used in important ceremonies too, but their main function wasn't for dancing like today. Take the Xipla or divine impersonators. These were regular people chosen to represent gods, and they wore divine garments, like the man representing Tezcatlipoca during the Toxcatl ceremony. Their use was as restricted as military uniforms today. Unless you're in the army, you can just wear the uniform, insignias, or weaponry. That's how it was back then. Even today, dancers aren't supposed to wear whatever they want. There have been seizures of feathers and animal skins dancers weren't supposed to own or sell, like jaguar hides, deer pelts, and feathers from protected species. And let's not even talk about women wearing this today. So, what were once tribute items or military honors are not simple things you can buy, if you had the money or the ego. Because sometimes it feels like a pageant to see who has the flashiest outfit. Now, how faithful are these modern costumes to the ancient ones? Sadly, not a single original costume has survived, and as for the so-called Moctezuma's headdress, we're not even sure if it's a crown copili, a cape, or a banner. So, the only evidence we have comes from depictions in pre-Hispanic and colonial codices, some statues, and rock or mural carvings. And of course, that limited evidence has sparked lots of creative interpretations, like the well-known paintings of Cuauhtémoc by Jesus Olguera, where he imagined what those outfits might have looked like. But aside from these modern-inspired artworks, there is no actual ancient image of Cuauhtémoc in such outfits. In the codices, he is only shown with a turquoise crown, never wearing this kind of costume. There's even a joke among dancers that modern-day dancers are more Mexica than Cuauhtémoc himself. There are more reliable references like full-body statues of eagle warriors found in the House of Eagles, but after the fall of Tenochtitlan, all those outfits were destroyed and banned. Indigenous people were covered up in colonial-style clothing, which had nothing to do with pre-Hispanic designs or meaning. Fast forward to the 20th century, the earliest records of concheros show they didn't even gear outfits at first. Eventually, they started wearing them, but with colonial flair. As seen in old pictures, the outfits covered the whole body. Then, with the rise of the Mexicanidad or Mexicayutul movement, splitting off from the concheria, dancers started showing more skin, men and women alike. And don't get me wrong, this isn't prudishness talking, but many of today's female costumes could have been unimaginable back then. What with the leg, cleavages, etc. That type of attire couldn't be associated with Hawiamine or pre-Hispanic entertainers, what some call Asian prostitutes. Even codices show that respectable women were supposed to dress modestly, with long skirts and huipiles, covering up most of their bodies. So, even in this, there are clear differences. Now, about today's material and designs. Most didn't even exist back then. Yes, we live in modern times, but here's where debates among dancers and reenactors head up. They often can't agree on authenticity or historical accuracy. Back then, there was no plastic, no beadwork, no synthetic fabrics, no huaraches with car tire soles. There were no plastic skulls, eagles, or snakes to strap on. No lycra suits on their costumes like many dancers gear today. And definitely no axes with the Batman logo. Come on. Even mini feathers used today brought by the Spanish. For example, rooster feathers, some of the cheapest, though cheap is relatively since they sold by the hundred, weren't available pre-Hispanically because, well, there were no roosters here back then. Same with many other types of feathers now in use. So, yes, controversies abound when it comes to costumes. In conclusion, there is influence from the past in today's dance attire. But they are ultimately modern reinterpretation of the pre-Hispanic past, often with elements from other cultures and even New Age aesthetics. If we were to enforce the original rules today, almost no one would be allowed to gear these costumes.